is it on? Can I take the speed right out?
Is that document on that drive?
It's on the desktop. Yeah, it's on the drive.
You don't want to take that out?
Well, yeah, but it's on the desktop, does that matter?
I was hoping not. I heard you say that.
Okay. Yeah. Mayor, is that everything?
Yep. That's great. Yeah. Thanks. Everybody ready?
Sure.
We're missing Dale. There he is.
Oh, that's my bathroom.
Sure, thanks. Dale, you ready to go?
Yes, I am.
Call this work session for Thursday, June 29th for the Common Council City of Plattsburgh. To order, please. The work session will discuss any items in the agenda that require further discussion. Anything any individual councilors would like to draw out of the agenda? If not, we've been diligently working on
There was a related question.
Just a little accolade.
Mhm.
We're not getting many of those. Item D about the farmer's market. I was down there on Wednesday and they were most appreciative of the root system being removed and the patch job, the trees clean, the view of the river. It was very well received. And they're talking about their Kids' Day event that they have, I think, 4 times the normal applicants asking to come. They usually get 30. I think they're up to like close to 200. It's going to be quite an event. So they're most thankful for the attention given to that. And the wooden walkway as well. Yes. All right. Just thought I'd pass that on.
And I'm very appreciative of them trying to do all these value-added things to get more people downtown. I know that you worked with them and Rochelle worked them, Councilor Armstrong worked with them closely to make this more attractive and hopefully bigger and better, and maybe even bigger and better next year. Thank you.
I just have one question. E. I just wanted to check with Mike Brody to make sure that that's fine with you as far as extending the leave with.
The exam hasn't been given in the first year, so that is extended to, only serve the employee. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
I actually concurred with both department heads before asking this to be on. Any other items? We're constantly trying to improve the numbers on the 5-year budget as new information becomes available. You'll notice that the fire arbitration cost went down a little bit. Richard, our Chamberlain Marks, refined the overhead rate to be more precise. That allowed that to come down a little bit. The attribution of healthcare costs, our healthcare advisor told us to expect about $600,000 of additional healthcare costs, but we realize not all of that is in the general fund. And in addition, Chamberlain Marks went and did a pretty thorough analysis of our healthcare expenditures over the last year, and for a separate methodology came up with a similar number, if I'm not mistaken, as Ms. Tayo did. So we refined that number downward. To be very liberal with this, I believe that we're going to have significant healthcare inflation in the future, especially if the ACHA passes. The reason being it's going to decrease the number of Medicare by 22 million people by in 10 years, as you know from the CBO estimates. The effect of taking more people out of the ACA, 22 million people who go uninsured, is it ends up being a large burden on emergency rooms where they end up getting most of their care from. Those costs are then passed on to the rest of us outside of the Medicaid system. So premiums are expected to rise. The other thing we didn't put in here is a potential $1 million hit in 2020, assuming that the legislation is currently in place to invoke the Cadillac tax. If that indeed goes through as legislated now, then we should expect about $1 million permanent increase in healthcare costs in the line 2020, but we didn't have that. So there's still some big numbers that are missing from this that we haven't included. Unfortunately, there's not very many big numbers on the revenue side or on the reducing expenses side, just increasing expenses. So this is a very conservative estimate, we believe, at this time. Another change we made is Richard calculated out the proper cost for the bands. That was quite an extensive calculation to figure out the bands that we'll be issuing over the next 4 years, and including then the total amount of debt we'll have to go on bonds. We did the refined calculations for those two items for the next 5 years, 4 years of bands, 1 year of bonding, and then repeated that cycle essentially for the next cycle as well. So that changed as well in this diagram. And then of course we then had to try to readjust expenses, savings, etc., to stay within your goals for tax increases. One more piece of information I'll hand out to you here. I really do encourage you to revise your estimate for an adequate fund balance. It is true that for a very large city, you can get by with a 5 or 10% fund balance, but the best advice from experts, this is a policy paper from the Government Finance Officers Association. They recommend a fund balance of at least 2 months of expenses or revenues. And for a city like ours that is small, so that those numbers go up the smaller you get. You may remember in stats, the law of large numbers works the other way. Small numbers really work against you in having greater volatility, and that's what the fund balance is there for, to protect you against volatility and changing healthcare costs, etc. So they recommend 2 months of revenue or expenses minimum. We would ought to adjust that higher than that because we're smaller than the typical city. We ought to adjust it higher than that still again because we also are self-insured with our health care plan. We don't have the advantage of being part of a big health care pool. So as a consequence, it's much more costly for a small city. I think a small city like ours, it should be closer to 30% fund balance rather than 5 to 10%. I know the comptroller said 5 to 10%. The comptroller also said if it gets too big, you should return that money to the taxpayers. I understand that. In the same document or another document I saw today, they said that excessive above 50% definitely is the point you need to start returning that money to the taxpayer. But we're in precariously low levels of fund balances, and I think we're seeing the consequences of not managing our fund balance very well. So just keep that in mind. I put a color coding in this. When we get over 2 months of fund balances, the fund balance as a percentage of expenses turns green. Under one scenario where we don't do any cuts, but we raise taxes dramatically, we could generate a fund balance temporarily into the safer zone in 2022, 23, and 24. But you can see by 2028, we're right back down into pretty much deficit financing, even if we're starting to do cuts in those years, of permanent cuts in the order of 3.5 or $2 million per year. You'll also see that in 2023, if we don't start making pretty dramatic cuts, we'll be at the 2% constitutional tax cap level. We're not allowed to raise taxes anymore. There is one other city that's in that enviable position in the state. That's Jamestown. They're an absolute economic basket case now because of it. By the way, these projections of when we're going to hit the 2% constitutional tax limit, I think, again, I'm being overly optimistic. If we start imposing the tax rates that are going to be required to balance the budget over the next few years of 30%, then 7%, then 6%, then 6%, then 5%, as Councillor Ensel has said, there's going to be a lineup of moving trucks, moving people outside of the city, and all our revenue projections are going to drop dramatically. So I think this, again, is an incredibly optimistic budget. Moving down to the second tier, this is essentially what you've seen before, although we've revised some of the numbers above to make them more accurate. And we're also recognizing that we're probably going to have a very difficult time making the savings this year, especially given how difficult these savings are obviously to make, and the year is already halfway through. Richard and I are confident that we're very diligent. We can produce temporary reductions of $200,000. But even then, it's going to require an awful lot of diligence, and the department heads, as you know, have been very helpful in trying to create temporary reductions. There are no permanent reductions we've made as of yet. So we're still hoping to come up with permanent reductions of $400,000. If we're able to do that, we will still end up at the end of the with a deficit overall of $719,000 and a fund balance that just about breaks even. So if we can do everything just perfectly from here on in, we might be able to get through the year without being insolvent. Technically, we're insolvent now because we haven't made many of these savings at this point. And finally, there's one surprise that hasn't been entered into the chart for this year. We have an emergency elevator repair. Obviously, our elevator has to be ADA compliant. And meeting with the elevator repairman just the other day, he said that it can't be repaired anymore at this, given the state of it. It has to go out in for a major repair rather than the minor repairs of $10,000 a year we've been hoping to continue on with under the maintenance contract. So you'll see that later on in the agenda. Does anybody have any issues with these numbers?
I just have a question with the general fund healthcare inflation. So where did that $600,000 number come from again?
That was from two sources, as I explained, from Judy Tayo. She met with myself, Richard Marks. I believe that Ann Chase was in that meeting as well. Councillor Kelly, were you in that meeting? I think there were councillors invited as well.
Yes.
And she gave us that number, so then we have partitioned it just to the general fund because we're only focusing on the general fund. And then Richard came up with a similar number within about, I think, $10,000 or $12,000 of that number through his own independent analysis.
You said there was a second person other than Judy Tayo, or just the Chamberlain and?
What do you mean?
You said there were two people, Judy Tayo and?
Judy Tayo and her colleague from Syracuse came.
Okay.
Zach Zuckerman,
Okay.
I believe was in the meeting.
Mayor Reed, may I speak, please?
Sure.
Josh, to corroborate the 250, Mr. Marks did an analysis of healthcare overages year to date, and I'll let him take it from here and explain what he found. And you'll see that 250 is probably going to be a pretty good number.
Yeah, as of June of last year compared to June 23rd of this year, we're 114,000 spent in excess of last year's cost. And by looking at that through the rest of the year, continuing that same trend, and based on the information First Niagara put together with our large claims being in excess of our large claims from last year, which are leading to the cost overrun, it points to a $250,000 additional increase in the budget to make sure we don't overspend that line. And it's probably even about a $15,000 cushion based on the current trend of where the numbers are right now. I'm going to update the numbers tomorrow for June 30th versus June 30th comparison to see where we actually are. Probably going to be another 10,000 overspent versus last year. So I think by having another 250,000 in the budget, we're going to be pretty close to coming in right on that line.
I'm just looking back historically. I don't think we've ever gone above 200,000. I don't believe in actual expenses. And I'm just curious, you know, if I'm correct, then why would Judy Tile recommend from a, you know, when we've never gone above 200 to jump up to 600 all of a sudden?
What she's looking at is the budget we put together at the beginning of the year versus the spending that's going on and the trends that she sees in the large claimants. She said that we're gonna be 600,000 over budget citywide.
Was it, Ann, are you here, Ann? Was that your understanding from the meeting too?
I don't recall seeing the $600,000 figure on the table for Judy Tile.
No? Okay, well, that's all right, I'll just contact her. Thank you.
There was a package of information she brought for all the counselors in a red binder. I don't know if you got those
Yeah.
yet, but that's where her analysis was.
And that 600,000 was noted?
Yes. And that's where they produced that.
I'll review. Thank you.
And this is one of the hazards of being self-insured. She mentioned that these cost increases are quite large because you have only 2 or 3 really sick people, you might be within budgeted. If all of a sudden you have 5 or 6 really sick people, you're over 600,000, $1 million, $2 million could easily conceivably be much, much more. That's the danger of being self-insured, where it becomes highly volatile. I saw a graph that HR Director Chase had produced that shows our fluctuations. They're huge. They're like a highly volatile stock market. Little markets with very little trading jump like that. Big markets with a lot of trading are very smooth. You pool those numbers across everybody in the North Country, it's not going to be nearly so volatile. You get self-insured and you're looking at only a population of 500 or so people, then it's incredibly dangerous. As a matter of fact, there's healthcare consultants that are helping to advise us right now say that it's absolutely foolhardy to even contemplate being self-insured with anything less than 1,000 to 2,000 members. Absolutely foolhardy. So we're experiencing the consequences of that. And we are exploring other alternatives incredibly actively to see if we can reduce that volatility.
I'm gonna ask what's probably a stupid question, but I mean, how would it be possible to increase our pool? I mean, is there any way of merging with other
Right.
entities so that our pool is
Like a consortium
larger?
like they have with the high school or
That's
the
right.
school districts?
That's what we're exploring, to be part of something called NISHIP, which is what the county does. The county's got even a larger population than ours, but they pooled into NISHIP for this very same reason. So we're trying to see if we can join in NISHIP with the county. Obviously, we're not making any commitments, but we are trying to explore that. Right now, we have a very good expert in this giving us some free advice and advising us whether we want to go out to contract for redesigning our policy. So as we get some advice on that, I'll certainly bring it all to you.
I inquired with the school district with Crystal Duke, my counterpart there, and asked about the BOCES plan, and unfortunately we can't join that because we're not part of an educational entity.
And I contacted Jay LeBrun on that very issue as well. Obviously, we're talking an awful lot about consolidation, shared services, and that need not be just with the county and the city. Some of this governor's initiative actually works with the city and the school district, as consistent with the resolution you all passed last week. And he told me the same thing, that we couldn't pool with them for reasons that they've developed their own specialized pool.
How many members do we have?
Do you know the number, Richard?
About 450 participants. The total population is near 1,000.
Okay.
With all
Including
dependents.
dependents.
1,000, okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Participants are made up of retirees and active employees. And I think the spread there is 230 to 220 retirees versus active employees. Approximately.
Thank you.
And NISHIP is a pool that I think they may have regional pools, but it's much larger. Be all the North Country, for instance, or maybe all of New York State NISHIP, so much less volatile. Any other concerns about the numbers?
Mayor Reed, I have a question for our fellow counselors, and that is, Is everyone here comfortable with these numbers? Sometimes when these spreadsheets are displayed, I think I see people's eyes glazing over. And sometimes my own eyes glaze over, even though I've looked at this 100 times. So my question is everyone comfortable with these numbers? Is there anything that needs explanation or further elaboration?
Well, you know, my eyes glazing over may have something to do with not being able to really see very well, so a hard copy along
Okay.
with the projection would be really helpful.
Okay, and I would also ask that we get electronic copies of this latest version so that we can see and manipulate the
Plug
numbers
it in.
ourselves.
Yeah. And to have them prior to the meeting would be really helpful, so that we can actually examine them with a magnifying glass if need be.
Yes, okay, that's a good idea, Josh, very good idea.
Can we get a copy also, department heads?
I don't see why not.
We
You know,
might
it's,
look at
it's,
the numbers to see if they add up.
as far as I'm concerned, it's public information, so why not? But, yeah, I just want to make sure that everyone on the council is comfortable with these numbers and that you believe them. Do you have any doubts? Are there any things up there that, you know, raise questions for you? Is there anything that our department heads feel may not be accurate? Anything that you see that might need to be improved?
You need a closer look at it so we can analyze it.
Okay.
It's a hard thing to sit there and look at.
It's a fair comment, Michael.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
The healthcare numbers, you guys caught those right away. I asked Chamber of Marks about that $600,000 number earlier this week. That's very disturbing to have a number that's moving from 600 to potentially 1.2 million. So you answered some of those questions right off the bat.
Okay. I thought people might be a little concerned about the 600,000 versus the 250. Have we explained that to everyone's satisfaction?
Well, I think you need to explain that stop loss doesn't kick in right away. So looking at first quarter and midterm numbers for healthcare are really kind of risky because sometimes the people that are going to trigger the stop loss don't trigger it until, close to year end. That's when we get reimbursed. The monies come back to the city from our stop loss carrier, so that drops the price of healthcare a little bit.
I would suggest also that, as Mr. Brody pointed out, this does need to be issued in a fashion that we can study. But I think some of the annotations that you provide are helpful, but if there's any other narrative explanation that could be provided that would help people process the information better, that would be helpful as well.
Okay.
And of course, remember, the easiest way to resolve these kinds of things is often study something and ask questions. And I do hold an hour-long block for you to come at any time. Or Thursday, 3 o'clock, you can come in any time in that hour and ask questions, meet with me. I don't think any of you can say that it's not an open door. As a matter of fact, many of you come in, stuck your head, and I'm in the middle of a meeting or a negotiation. I bring you all in. I hope nobody feels that for some reason I'm holding information from you or not being willing to share information, but it really is a two-way street. You have to come out and actually come to the office where the information is, sit with me, ask the questions, and I'm incredibly happy to answer them. But I can't anticipate what your questions might be because we're all individuals with different ways of
Did
looking
we
at things.
receive this through email though, before the
No.
meeting? Okay, so.
You haven't received this
Yeah.
version. You've received
Yeah.
Right.
We
previous.
received many other versions.
I know
But
that.
when we're talking,
I know that.
But when we're talking about an amended version of something at a council meeting, we should have prior knowledge so that we're able to process it.
How much prior knowledge would be appropriate, Josh?
Huh? Like
A day?
A day, if
Okay.
possible, as much as possible.
What if something changes in the 24-hour period between the time you receive it and the meeting?
Then
Should
that
we
could
talk
be-
about that?
That
Or should we?
that could be reflected then at the meeting,
Okay.
Yeah, it's easier to point out just that one thing.
rather than
Okay.
have
Yeah.
a whole entire, body
Okay.
of work that no one
Okay.
has seen or knows anything about.
Okay.
Well, I don't think that's fair to say, isn't it? You know a lot about it. We've seen this many, many times. It's just modified.
I'm just
As a matter of
saying
fact, some of the changes were made just an hour or two ago, as Richard was you know, Richard and Dean have been working endlessly to try to figure out how to solve this problem. We're meeting 3 hours a day, every single day. This is a dynamic, very fast-moving thing, and.
Did you know about the change from 600 to 250,000 yesterday?
I think I knew yesterday, I didn't know
So
the
then
ones about.
you could have sent it to us then.
You're right, and the figures that are far more significant than the one you're focusing on, we just found out an hour or two ago. Would you like to focus more on the ones that are far more significant than that? Because I can certainly spend time with you on those right now.
If you think it would be helpful,
Richard, do you want to describe more fully how we came to the calculations of the bands and bond costs to satisfy the councilors?
we could either do it in this session, or if you want to call, maybe another budget meeting, that may be a more appropriate venue.
When is your next budget meeting scheduled, Councilor Kelly?
Well, it isn't scheduled. I have it in my head that we're going to start up budget meetings again in the month of July, which is Saturday. So they're forthcoming.
So maybe at the next budget meeting, then we'd have some time to digest the new numbers between now and then.
The only thing that I have to ask everyone to be a little understanding and lenient about is we have an extreme urgency to get this done. I think Mayor Reed told us last week that $30,000 a week is what we're gonna have to find. So every week that we don't find the savings, that compounds another $30,000 we have to find. So it gets more difficult. So, we have 6 months basically to end the year and turn in that zero fund balance, but we got to get started on it now. Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
Any other questions or any other items you'd like to discuss before we begin with?
Steve has a question.
Steve?
A couple quick questions. I think as of last week, we were looking for 950,000 in 2017. Am I reading this right? This is now, sorry to see, 600,000 in 2017 between permanent and temporary.
Between permanent and temporary reduction.
Is that?
We're recognizing, given the year is already half over, the opportunity to save that large amount is becoming more and more and more difficult.
Okay.
One advantage we had is that we recalculated the healthcare expense. That saved us from having to come up with that higher 900,000. So we're trying to be more realistic.
So I have two more questions. The 1% expenses inflation assumption for 2017, is that actual number, or is that just there to, was that an actual number for 2017? Or is that there to just provide the
just an assumption
calculation?
I didn't make that assumption. I think Richard had come up with that number, and then 2.85 for subsequent years. It may have been some extra costs. We can ask him.
The 2.85 was the combination of numbers that you and I came up with based on the trend of the expenses across the board for the general fund, assuming low labor cost increases, between 1% and 1.5%, and then higher increases in other expenses. The 1% itself was just listed here as I don't know what that one's for, I really don't. Because I think 17 was supposed to be just, here's the budget, here's the baseline, and we're not assuming any other increases except for the individual ones that we put in the lower section of the graph. For individual expenses we know are going to happen above and beyond what we have for budget. Now the 1%, I don't know if that was added just because of an anticipation of additional cost in labor rates for maybe the
negotiations. Inflation is a little bit higher than you would have anticipated a year ago.
Yeah, we don't have anything budgeted for contracts that are supposed to be settled this year.
But we can look into that, obviously, yeah.
So that's 1% of 10,902,000?
No, it'd be 1% of 22,385,000.
Oh.
So it'd be $223,000.
Yeah, okay, so is, I'm trying to figure out if we budgeted for inflation in 2017 at 1%, is that accurate since we've already budgeted and we're spending already? Like, shouldn't it be 0?
Take it out.
Or, I don't know, I'm just asking.
No,
Or if there's like especially with like asking union increases, for example, which is something I'm aware of in my department, that maybe that's part of that, or,
I'm not sure where that 1% came from.
okay.
But that is a good assumption about, inflation or increases in labor rates that haven't been settled yet in contracts that are due to be settled this year.
Okay.
ASME being one of them as of July 1st.
Right, and that's where that would show up.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Because that wasn't in the original budgeted numbers. There's nothing in the budgeted numbers for increases in labor. The only one that's up there is the award numbers that we've been informed are now a legal requirement
Right.
for the fire union.
Okay. One final question that I didn't understand when I was looking at the pieces of this before. 2020, there's a reduction in permanent long-term revenue of $264,000. Any idea what that is?
What line number?
It's
And, or no.
seven,
F7?
yes. Line seven.
We believe there's going to be a
Right.
number of Article 7 challenges, tax assessment cases, including potentially one big one in a few years, and we wanted to anticipate that.
Okay. Well, that would be.
Again, that line is pretty conservative. That assumes that we don't have any other titles or Article 7 challenges in the next few years. And obviously, if you look back in the last few years, we've had some incredibly large and costly ones.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Any other questions in work session? If not, let's call the meeting of the Common Council to order. Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Reed?
Present.
Counselor Armstrong?
Here.
Counselor Kelly?
Here.
Counselor Dowdle?
Here.
Counselor Renzel?
Here.
Counselor Casper?
Here.
Counselor Kretzer?
Here.
I had a distinct pleasure today. Some parts of my job are very difficult, like worrying about the budget. As you can imagine, a finance nerd like me, this is something literally keeps me up at night. But a couple pointed out to me that there are some really pleasurable things I get to do in my job. I got to marry Jeffrey and Kira earlier today in a wonderful ceremony upstairs in our beautiful auditorium. So that was an incredible, a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed that. I'm also very excited about the Mayor's Cup coming up, beginning on July 1 with a concert in the park just across the street. You can see the tents are already being set up for it, so please come to that. That's going to be a woman from Canada named Dawn Tyler Watson to help celebrate Canada Day with us. Understandably so, Quebecers aren't a real big fan of Canada Day, so they don't mind coming and celebrating Canada Day down in Plattsburgh, hearing some great Montreal music. So do come to see that. This being sponsored in conjunction with the Plattsburgh Blues and Jazz Association. And Sandra Geddes has arranged a whole huge amount of events all week, and I think you're all even having a rummage sale this weekend as well to kick things off?
The citywide garage sale, there are 53 garage sales going on in the city of Plattsburgh this weekend, so I hope there can be lots of shopping taking place. It's the first ever, everybody's excited. Garage salers are very serious people.
So there are some really cool things that beckon well to our future in Plattsburgh, and when I look at the budget figures we were just addressing a moment ago, I don't do it with any pessimism. I do it with a lot of hope, because if we can create this firm foundation of strong and sustainable finances, I think it really ensures that we can hand off to the next generation a city in even better shape than we got, or hopefully better shape than we found it in. So to me, this is an optimistic exercise in all the events you're going to see, and what is perhaps one of the biggest mayor's cups in years because of all the partnerships Sandra's been able to construct with groups as varied as the Sunrise Rotary Club and the various other performers that are donating their time in some cases for free as well. It's going to be wonderful, and I think that this is the thing we can be really joyous about and makes all of our really hard work here worth it. So that's all the comments I have.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Common Council held on June 22nd, 2017 are approved and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councillor Quester and seconded by Councillor Casper. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the payrolls of the various departments of the city of Plattsburgh for the week ending June 28th, 2017 in the amount of $141,486.96 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby empowered and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Ensel. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the reports as listed are hereby ordered, received, and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councillor Kelly and seconded by Councillor Ensel. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the bills audited by the Common Council for the week ending June 30th, 2017 in the amount of $1,322,954.77 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and city clerk are hereby authorized and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Dowdle. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Are there any individuals who'd like to address the council? This part of the meeting, we ask you to address any items that are on the agenda. There will be another opportunity to speak at the end of the meeting on any issues that concern our residents. Seeing none, can we continue?
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves the Champlain Valley Morning Horse Association to hold an annual community flea market for Elmore SPCA on October 14th, 2017, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. in the Farmers Market Building. Insurance will be required.
Moved by Councillor Cressler, seconded by Councillor Kelly. Discussion.
I just had a question. I was looking at the application, and one of the addresses just said 1005 Cumberland Head. I don't know if that's Cumberland Head Road or if it...
It would be, that's the right number for Cumberland Head Road, yeah.
Cumberland Head Road.
Any other questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Councillor Armstrong?
Yes.
Councillor Kelly?
Yes.
Councillor Dowdle?
Yes.
Councillor Ensel?
Yes.
Councillor Casper?
Yes.
Councillor Cresser?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves the building inspector to refund $25 to Lake City Electric for a building permit application 2358 because Lake Forest decided not to pursue the project.
Moved by Councillor Dowdle and seconded by Councillor Ensel. Discussion? Roll call.
Councillor Armstrong?
Yes.
Councillor Kelly?
Yes.
Councillor Dowdle?
Yes.
Councillor Ensel?
Yes.
Councillor Casper?
Yes.
Councillor Cretzer?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves the building inspector to refund $74 to General Engineers Construction Dave Murchison for building permit application 2592 because Clark's Landing decided not to pursue the project.
Moved by Councillor Kelly and seconded by Councillor Dowdle. Discussion?
I was just curious about these two resolutions. Why did these contractors withdraw their applications? May I ask you, Joe, to explain that to us, please?
Oh, yeah, sure. The first one, the electrical at Lake Forest, they've got, they figured out they needed a bigger project. It's part of a bigger project. They're gonna do something further on down the line. Once they investigated this, it didn't make sense to do this little one. So, I think they're going with a different contractor and all that. The second one, I actually don't know many details behind this besides, that Dave Murchison, who applied as a contractor, has informed us that he's not doing that work because they didn't want to do it.
Okay, thank you.
A couple of these a year.
Yes, I know, Joe. I thought, are we looking at a trend or?
No, we don't.
No.
Typically, it's just a couple of years.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor Casper?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore, the Common Council approves the Plattsburgh Farmers and Crafters Market Group to hold the 6th Annual Kids' Day event on Saturday, August 5th, 2017, from 10 a.m. to 1:30 p.m., blocking parking spaces next to the Farmers Market Pavilion on Durkee Street. Insurance is required for the bouncy house and the 4-H petting zoo.
Moved by Counselor Armstrong, second by Counselor Kretzer. Discussion.
Do we have any idea exactly how many spaces they're looking at?
Sylvia's not.
While we're researching that, could I ask a question about this? Dale, in the work session, you said that something about 200
Well, they have
participants?
multiple applicants over years prior. They've had over 1,100 likes on Facebook. They're hoping that the gas station cleanup is completed because some of the fencing is coming onto parking spaces. So they think they're going to go into at least another row. You know, interest now and action then could be two different things, but
Is
there's
that 200 booths or 200?
setups, but there's some of a table.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it's-
I see the diagram, but there's nothing.
There's a line between the pavilion and the old highway.
Put on your glasses, Kim.
That's big, 200 is big.
Well, if that's what it comes to, yeah.
Your question resolved, Counselor
I
Armstrong?
say it, okay. Yeah, okay, I'm fine. So,
Any other questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
yes.
Counselor Casper?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore, the council approves a 6-month extension for a leave of absence for James P. Welch from his position as maintenance worker 2 in the Department of Public Works, effective August 12, 2017 to February 12, 2018, to continue in his provisional appointment as a municipal code inspector in the building inspector's office. This extension is requested because the exam for municipal code inspector will not be given until September 9, 2017, and the original leave of absence was approved for a 1-year term, August 12, 2016 through August 12, 2017.
Moved by Counselor Ensel, second by Counselor Dowdle. Discussion. One way we may avoid these in the future is if we give a leave of absence, it might be triggered by some sort of event like the occurrence of the subsequent exam. They anticipated the exam will be offered within the year, as we discussed, but it took a little bit longer. Roll call, please.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor Casper?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
And
Resolved-
before
I-
we, yep, go ahead.
Can at this point I ask that we go into executive session for the purpose of discussing pending arbitration?
You'd have to state the type of arbitration.
The general fund budget increase of $746,109 in judgments and claims based on an award for the fire union.
So you would like to go into executive council to discuss the state of the arbitration
Yes.
award with the firefighters union?
Yes.
With the council.
With, yep.
That's moved by Counselor Dowdle. Is it seconded by Counselor Armstrong? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We can. May take 10 minutes, folks.
property rates.
And I wondered if they could vary this so that, because out of the snow is serious.
That was the plan by the city, that was planned by a private organization.
I did.
Originally was planned in low, especially in the south and the west end, was planned 50, 70 years ago.
I'm sure it is, because they're only like 25 to 30. Okay. But it's just this kind of, as long as something does happen.
Trying to find Dutch elm. Trying to find Dutch elm around here. No,
And just for they start like 100,000 healthy trees.
But we got spruce trees 30 miles from the main road. So what they've done is they ban solar. But it doesn't have some gravel for it. What they do is they down with the trees is they put gravel down on the road. They're okay with it. Well, when it's built, it feels like you're on marbles. And the problem is, Germany and their own ones have unlimited speed for both cars. And they can avoid that to go fast. Now, I lived in Germany for a number of years, and these the last two and a half times in college. You get a German road and there's no snow cover. You get up to the border with Holland, and it's clean as can be. The judges sold it, roads, like it took out and that's saving it. 75% of Holland used to be up the border. So it's already full of snow. So, and more snow than American gravel. And their roads are always spotless.
What I think I learned is don't get a lot of space. But I also know. So, Scott's going to. Yeah.
We're returning out of executive session. We discussed the issue of the arbitration award regarding City of Plattsburgh and the firefighters union, and no decisions were made during that executive session. We continue then?
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves the City Chamberlain to adjust the 2017 general fund budget by an increase of $746,109 in judgments and claims based on an award for the fire union from interest arbitration and an increase of $250,000 in health insurance based on the semi-annual review of the general fund budget results.
Moved by Councillor Kelly, second by Councillor Dowdle. Discussion. Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor Casper?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the common council approves the city chamber to adjust the 2017 general fund budget by an increase of $80,000 in municipal buildings contract services based on a quote from the service provider to modernize the city hall elevator.
Moved by Councilor Armstrong, second by Councilor Dowdle. Discussion?
I guess so. When was this first brought up as being an issue?
Friday of last week, if I recall.
So there was no previous discussion about, with anyone about this having to be done, or the need, or the...
Otis Elevator recognized that they've been telling us for years the need would be imminent. We've been hoping to get by on a maintenance contract, and they said that with the most recent unreliability, they just simply can't keep doing this anymore. Is that correct, Chamberlain?
Yeah, Sylvia's got the details on it. Unfortunately, she's on vacation and can't explain it, but it's been failing and erratic, and from what her email explained, the budget resolution. Without modernizing the elevator, Otis can't guarantee that it's going to be functional and not have erratic behavior and maybe trap someone and so forth. So they said that you've got to bite the bullet and do this to fix it once and for all.
And this was it Sylvia's recommendation? Or from her conversations with them?
Yeah.
And she just had these conversations on Friday?
I believe so, yeah. I was just copied on emails.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor Casper?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the common council approves change order number 1 to contract number 2017-05, former highway oil building demolition not to exceed $14,800. There is a sufficient funding in capital project H5110.63, 2017 40 Bridge Street demolition.
Moved by Councilor Kretzer and second by Councilor Ensel. Discussion?
That's exciting.
Isn't it?
And of course, I think in that fund will remain about still $15,000 or $20,000, if I recall. Isn't that correct? Is Engineer Farrington here?
That's approximately the balance, but we'll use that for the beautification and restoration, topsoil, sod, some picnic tables, and suspensions.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor Casper?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the common council approves Assessor Kathy Livingston to attend commercial valuation in Excel in Ithaca, New York from July 17th through 20th, 2017. The cost will not exceed $1,526. This course will complete the New York State requirements as a certified assessor.
Moved by Councilor Armstrong, second by Councilor Casper. Discussion? Roll call.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor Casper?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
There's no items for initial consideration. I do believe there's a presentation from the Strategic Planning Committee.
And with that, I would like to ask members of the committee to kind of, if they feel like it, come up and kind of sit in a way where you can all answer questions or make comments. No? I'm getting a big stare down here. Okay.
Kevin, can you hit the lights, please? Thank you.
You're gonna put it on slideshow? Sure.
You are
There
now.
we go. It just looks better. Nice. Presentation. So, it's been a pleasure. You can forward it, to work with. That's such a fine committee.
for the last few months. And they're listed above. Such a diverse group of people with valuable perspectives, wonderful bases of knowledge, and it was not only educational for all of us, but it was a lot of fun. And you know, we did some pretty good work, I think. Go ahead. Early on, we developed a purpose for our efforts, and you know, I think we might have reported out to you that we're really planning for the strategic plan. So we were going to be facilitating what would lead to eventually a strategic planning team to serve and to develop that plan. And those are the values that we tried to practice as we were doing our work. Now, we learned a lot about strategic planning, and we consulted a guide that we felt was really pretty comprehensive. We discovered, you can go ahead, that there were many municipalities across the nation who had engaged in this process of strategic planning. And I want you to focus on adaptable. You know, it's really, any strategic plan is supposed to be kind of like, in the parlance, a living document that is fluid, that can be adapted to changing conditions within a city. We learned a lot about what strategic planning should entail, and we wanted to capture what our future could be like by engaging in this process. Go ahead. So, you know, these are usually the questions you wind up answering when you're engaged in the strategic planning process. Yeah, you know, the biggest one is, you know, it's easy to imagine, oh, not easy, but it's easier to imagine where you want to be in the future than how to get there. And to, you know, really try to pinpoint that process of how you're going to plan to reach your goals is the biggest advantage of engaging in this kind of process. And then, most importantly, you know, how do you know by measuring the outcomes whether you have indeed progressed? You know, these are pretty well known. You know, probably a number of you in the audience have engaged in some kind of strategic planning along the way. And these are the kind of familiar characteristics of a strategic plan. Go ahead. So, you know, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an outline of how we proceeded with our work. And as early as March, Josh and I met with Mayor Reed to kind of get this project off the ground. And we selected a team that you saw at the beginning. But our role, as I said, was to plan for the plan, and eventually a strategic planning team would develop and produce the plan. We met in March, we set our purposes and how we were going to operate, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of a capsule summary of what we did. So these are the sources we consulted. We looked through many municipal strategic plans. We looked at the process outlined in that manual from the State Controller's Office. And, you know, we came up with our kind of own definition of what would be the best kind of plan to develop. Be forward-looking, attainable, holistic, represent a nod to the past and a vision for the future. I think those were actually Paul Deacon-Menescus' words. And achieved through collaboration. And in our work, and Paul enabled us to do this, we took a look at a lot of documents that we had already produced as a city, a lot of grant documents, just trying to study what kinds of visions, what kinds of goals we had set that we had already achieved, And we wanted to make sure that we both acknowledge what had been done in the past, but also as a way of doing that, build on it in the future. We spent, as a result of looking at all those documents and looking at kind of the benchmarks of a strategic plan, we came up with 5 strategic planning areas to capture the life in our community. What are the attributes of a great community? And we felt, and we spent maybe 2 weeks on this, that these 5 areas really captured what our city is all about. But, you know, of mice and men and well-laid plans and all that, you know, we really were taken, you know, to a different level as the council was working through budgetary planning. Mayor Reed made his press conference about the state of the city's financial mess. And so, because a city has to be willing to allocate certain resources in order to carry out and implement strategic planning, we questioned whether we were really ready. The state controller's manual had a pre-flight checklist that we went back and rechecked, and that's on the next slide. And you will see that these are the questions that the the state controller's office asks of whatever team is evaluating this. And we knew we had Mayor Reed's support. We weren't ready to say yes to the ones that had asterisks, particularly the one that had to give us the opportunity to look at where we were financially in the city. So, yeah. So as you can see, these areas are really pretty particular, and you know, given the state of affairs in the city, we just didn't feel that we could conscientiously move forward with the idea of creating a strategic plan at this point. So, and I just said that, so we can go on to the next one. So, but we developed some new goals as a result of, you know, reevaluating, and we really do believe that the strategic planning process is a valuable one. You know, I think we all feel rather educated on how it can work. So we began to list a number of goals that we might try to achieve as a committee. You know, internally, there are ways to work on strategic planning and on a smaller scale. How can we use key performance indicators to show what our outcomes are? Go ahead. I don't like to read, but okay, I will. So, investigate how much of the budget is reinvested in the community. I don't know if any spreadsheet that we have really is dedicated to that question, but we felt that it would be valuable to explore that. You know, this idea of looking at the tension between financial constraints, investment, and growth is one that, you know, I remember Becky Casper bringing up when we were looking at some of the hard questions that we were going to have to answer regarding the budget. We have a valuable member from our team who is associated with the college. He offered up the idea of a community dashboard online to throw up our objectives and measure how we're achieving them in whatever the particular goal is we select. And involving the public in developing our goals, either departmentally or in whatever area, would be an idea that we could explore as a committee. Okay. So, here's what we're offering. We agree that it's been gratifying to participate in this effort. We didn't expect that we would reach the conclusion we did at the end of it all. But, you know, as everything in life, circumstances change and you have to adjust and adapt to them. So we are ready to help, and we just want to ask you, in what way can we do that? Yes.
First of all, thank you. Thank you, Joshua, and thank
All of us.
everyone.
Want to stand at least? Come on.
Yeah.
Carolyn and
Chamberlain, and George Chase.
There you
Back
go.
there, also
Paul.
unlocking the monument.
Thank you, guys.
That's
Thank you,
that's
ladies.
And
always,
Kirk Irvich is teaching at military, so.
that's always above and beyond, so thank you.
Yeah.
And then I have a quick comment and then I think a substantial question.
Sure.
My quick
Oh, boy.
comment is.
I hope everybody else helps answer.
My quick comment is, I wonder to what degree we are shooting ourselves in the foot by constantly talking about crisis, 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 to the extent that we can't even formulate a strategic plan because
Okay.
we're in such crisis. I think it's one thing to talk about crisis, to light a fire under the council and under city workers in order of making sure the budget is resolved in an effective fashion. But I'm concerned that we are putting a face out to the public that discourages people from making the kinds of investments that we
I'm
need.
listening, sorry.
I know you are, okay. So
Sorry.
that's just a quick comment. That's,
All right.
That's like 6 months of the discussions that we've had, and I'm a little concerned about that.
Okay.
But here is my, and that's for us to talk about
Sure.
constantly, I think. I think we have to be self-aware of what kind of message we're sending, not just to ourselves, but to the city. But here's something that I think that you can answer, and I've had a conversation with Ann about this, and had a conversation with Mike Cashman last year, and Tom Moran, who was the former director of the Institute for Ethics, and also the former mayor. We talked several times about the need for creating an ethics board that we could use regionally. So I think that because, I thought of that when you had your first slide when you were talking about values.
Right.
And and that goes to government too. And if we had an ethics board, a shared ethics board, then we could address issues, county, town, city, that professionals can have conversations that in fact make government more open, transparent, and ultimately ethical.
Excellent idea. I just want you to know, though, in the pre-flight checklist, that wording about crisis is right from the manual. So we had to answer that question: are we in a position to undertake strategic planning when there are so many pressures on our budget? So
Can I just inject here, since we're on that word, crisis?
Sure.
According to the manual, and that's the local government management guide, finally, most importantly, you need to know where the locality or unit is presently. That means if you answer yes to, are we at crisis level, then strategic planning is not advised at this time.
Right.
Strategic planning and crisis management should not be undertaken together. In fact, strategic planning during a crisis may only intensify the original difficulties and create new administrative, financial, and morale problems.
Yep. And thank you.
So
I always depend on you for good reference.
That gets you off the hook, Colin.
May I speak?
Sure.
When we started financial planning and responding to our current crisis, always in the back of my mind is the next time we do a 5-year budget plan, I hope we have the luxury to talk about the future. Not just in terms of dollars and cents, but in terms of what can we do? What can we do to enhance life in our city? So if we work really, really hard on the current crisis and end up with that balanced budget at the end of the year, then I think that changes that, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And then it does become feasible to start talking about strategic planning at that point. So if we can just get there, then the future is going to be a lot of fun, I think.
And I might add, I don't feel we are in a crisis. I think we've got a huge challenge in front of us. We could create a crisis out of it by not responding to it. Then we'll certainly be in a crisis when we're insolvent and contemplating bankruptcy. But I think this is all completely avoidable. There are things we can do. There's plans of bounding. There's opportunity to consolidate services and share services. I believe the council ought to develop your own ideas for how to resolve these budgetary crises. We can put all the various ideas on the floor. Ultimately, you all are going to be approving them or disapproving them anyway. But I think we have some challenges. I think we can create a crisis out of it by not dealing with the challenges effectively in a timely manner. But I'm very optimistic that we can overcome these. Otherwise, I wouldn't be working so hard to do it. If I thought this was hopeless and no need to bother with budgetary planning and strategic planning, we could just all throw up our hands in exasperation. I don't think we're there at all. I'm optimistic. I think the committee ought to continue doing work. We still need guidance on how we want to lay out our city. We need guidance on how we want the DRI to roll out. We need guidance on future zoning and planning. These are all very good things to do, even though we have certain budget challenges that we have to work incredibly hard and diligently and thoughtfully to solve.
Can I just ask, the strategic plan, what is the comprehensive plan when we compare that?
It has, well, we asked that question. We brought the comprehensive plan to the table, and it really has to do with land use. Just strictly land use.
The comprehensive plan does? Mm-hmm. Okay. And Mike, you have the Citizens Advisory Committee, is that gonna tie into this? Because eventually
that was for finance, you mean?
Budget.
Citizens Financial Advisory Committee, which they, we could work together.
Strategic plan, I don't know, because it
You
eventually.
mean work with them?
Well, one of the suggestions is you don't, you work with the customer. So I didn't know if that was gonna tie in eventually with that. Okay.
Good.
We're open to suggestions.
We are too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rochelle.
Can you turn that on?
Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle.
Well, thanks to the committee.
Any other reports? Liaison reports?
Did you want to mention our meeting?
Well, since Dale brought it up, I guess it's a good introduction to, we had our first Citizens Financial Advisory Committee meeting last Tuesday night. And we had some citizens come be with us, and we had a very productive discussion of the council's 5-year budget plan. And then we invited conversation about how do we get out of this? How do we go forward? And we are already in our first meeting, we've had some great suggestions. So we will continue to pursue this and see where it goes. But we do have a lot of citizens out there who are interested. And one of the things they all agreed to do was go back to their neighborhoods and share this information with their neighbors so that it becomes a citywide conversation and everybody understands what's going on. Did I miss anything?
Mike, I think you're right on point.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for taking that time.
I admit I'm mostly dealing with the finances right now, so I haven't been working very hard on some of the other committees, but I do look forward to getting back to that work very soon. We have been doing all of our due diligence and talking with the county, looking for the opportunities for consolidated and shared services. I think whenever you're prepared to consider some options, we certainly got some things we've quite fully explored. But as I mentioned earlier, I really do ask the council to develop your plans. This is $400,000 of permanent, $200,000 of temporary savings that we all have to do. And ultimately, the mayor's office can do very little of them. We can help formulate plans. I can recommend things to you, but ultimately, for any of the permanent changes, they're all going to require your action. So I really encourage you to have your own independent dialogues and discussions with your various liaison departments, et cetera, to come up with savings as well. And since we're going to be producing next year's budget very quickly, I ask you not to focus just on this year, but this year and next year as well, because we're going to need to put that blueprint out just in another few months. Obviously, on averaging about $3 million of cutbacks in 3 years, mostly permanent and only part of it temporary, it's going to be very, very difficult. So as far ahead as we can think, and as much as we can converse and share our ideas in the spirit that they're offered, I think to be very, very helpful, so thank you.
Can I follow up on something you mentioned?
Sure.
I heard through the grapevine yesterday that you're pursuing appointing several department heads for shared services with the county. And I'd like to ask that slow down until we have an assessment of the impact of any shared services of our department heads on the city, not only in terms of whether the services that we are providing for our constituents and residents are effective, but also how it perhaps could impact revenue. And I really would like to hear, before we go any further, from the county and what the county's position and what their vision of that collaboration would be.
Well, you didn't hear that from me because I don't have the capability as the mayor of doing any of these changes or appointments myself. All I can do is make a series of recommendations to you, and you pass them. So you certainly didn't hear that from me. That's not occurring.
So
I am exploring a number of different opportunities for consolidation. That's right. And I mentioned them last week as a very direct response to a very direct question from Councilor Dowdle.
Right. So my question is, have you approached department heads?
For the most part, yes. And told them that I am considering and exploring them. Yeah.
Well, just on behalf of the council, I would appreciate it if we could be part of that conversation prior to any other steps being taken, because that's a pretty big impact on the city.
It also mentioned August 15th, there's a meeting with Mr. Zerlo, you mentioned.
Correct. There'll be more meetings before then as well. We're meeting on about a twice monthly basis to discuss various opportunities for shared services. They're all public meetings as part of his effort for consolidating services across the county and municipalities.
But August 15th was mentioned. I didn't know if that was the end meeting or the result.
Pretty close to the end. I think he has to have his report in about a week after August 15th, if I recall.
Okay.
As you know, that program, if we can find opportunities to share services and do consolidations, obviously we receive a share of those savings in the city, but the same amount of the first year savings will actually be sent to us in addition as a check from the state government. So it kind of doubles your savings in that first year. I don't think that incentive ought to act as a reason to do any of these plans. They have to make sense on a long-term basis for long-term savings. But it is a pleasant short-term bonus that we would receive as well.
I have another question on that, because you've said that this is going to come to the council for approval, but it's my understanding from the charter that it is not the council's responsibility to make decision regarding the hiring, firing, or the conduct and operations of any office. So why would that have to come to the council?
If we require
Touch on that. There's a personnel decision. So if someone is guilty of misconduct or for some other basis, the mayor would have the power to terminate them.
Right.
But if we're talking about altering, consolidating, or essentially abolishing a department, that's purely a council decision. And certainly, if that would be the most drastic reaction, the less drastic would be if the council decided to do a budget amendment and defund a department. That would have a similar result without abolishing it, but would certainly prevent.
With that said, I cannot say strenuously enough, if in fact we have to make that decision, then we need to be in on the conversation from the get-go. I mean, I'm very serious about that. I can't sit up here and make a decision that impacts someone's livelihood, someone's life, and city without, and I've said it before, you guys have heard this from me over and over and over again. I need the information, and I need to be part of the conversation, so I'd appreciate it if that takes place on a continual basis.
And also, I guess I'm curious if you have, through conversations with Mike Zerlo, if the two of you have identified specific offices that you wish to consolidate, and if you, I guess, had conversations with any department heads in regards to such consolidation prior to any news with the council, and then furthermore, did Mike Zerlo say, without a shadow of a doubt, these are consolidations that I would like to do, and these are the departments I'd like, and I guess, did you make any action to any city supervisors telling them that such a thing was, I guess, in the works?
Well, I don't think anything's in the works. We're talking about various scenarios for how we do consolidation. Mike Zerlo nor I, or neither of us are in a position to make those happen without council approval. We're having all kinds of discussions of what the possibilities are, but I think you're suggesting it's carried much farther and offering me much more authority than I actually have to do. What I can do is do explorations. All I can do is do explorations. In the process, Councilor Dowdell last week asked me what explorations I was pursuing, and given that these requests for us to consider certain ideas were made in a public meeting at the county, I felt it perfectly appropriate for me to share them, answer a very direct question from a councilor, which I did, that we're exploring various consolidations. But that's all I can do is explore. I then felt it was necessary to have the courtesy to discuss this, let people know who may be affected that we're exploring them, and I felt that that was fair enough, required to do after I answered that very direct question, so I've done that as well. But that's all I can do is exploration.
It's just, it doesn't seem like it's been collaborative. It seems like it's been, you've made decisions and assumptions.
Please, let me correct you. I've made no decisions. I cannot make decisions. Only the council can make decisions.
But why would you approach a department supervisor telling them that their job is in jeopardy if you have no idea if the county is even on board in such a process?
I've never said to any department supervisor their job is in jeopardy. I've said that I'm making these explorations to explore consolidations.
But without any express recommendation from the county that they are indeed wanting to pursue this.
They're also making the same explorations.
It just is, as far as process, which is becoming an issue with the way that business is being conducted, process is not being implemented in a proper fashion. The communication and the collaboration is not transparent, and it's unfair to the city supervisors, in my opinion.
I respectfully disagree. Any further discussion? Please, Councilor Dowdell.
Can I just ask, the Falcon Seaboard, Richard, which turned into Saranac Energy Program, is that the right name? Saranac Energy? Falcon Seaboard?
Yeah.
That was a 20-year?
I believe it was 1994 to 2009, 15 years.
It's over.
Well, it's not totally over, but it's not generating the $850,000 the city counted on as permanent revenue from 1994 forward. It's back down to $93,300 per year.
Presently, we're at 93,000? And how long will that go? Do we know?
It's my understanding that it could end any time.
And how would it end?
That they would just stop using that cogen plant. It's been reduced dramatically as far as the use of that cogeneration plant to sell power back to the grid, to New York State Electric and Gas.
Bill has his hand up.
Okay. Yes, he
I
does.
can add to that. What happened around 2009 was the contract that it had with NYSEG, which was basically, it required NYSEG to buy every kilowatt that place generated at 9 cents a kilowatt hour. And that was a lot more than NYSEG was paid for other power that it was obtaining. So as soon as that contract expired, NYSEG did not renew. What happened with the plant then at that point is it got a deal with the New York ISO, and it's in standby mode. And it's being paid to be in standby mode. So if there's a need for the plant to come online quickly, they have to rev up those generators and come online.
Okay.
And come online and service.
Okay.
They're being, to be honest, they're being paid very well for that service.
Okay. I was going to take it a little different direction. Part of the agreement was use of the beach and the city library. Is that correct? From the town of Plattsburgh?
I think so, but I have to go back and look at the details of it.
That's right.
I think you're right.
Okay. And so the usage is as good as we're getting some money from that? The use of our library and beach? Can that be reviewed somehow?
Sure, we can take a look at that. certainly, you know, the city isn't being compensated in the same level it used to be, obviously.
True, very true.
It's a $150,000 difference. But sure, we can take a look at that. I think Steve Peters can probably tell you how many non-residents, non-city residents attend the beach. I think he has statistics on that, and certainly Ann knows at the library, city versus non-city
Right.
visitors as well. And also people who are card-carrying members.
True.
Yeah.
As I know, the town doesn't have a library, and the public library districts seem to be growing interest. So there's certainly a shared service. We couldn't consolidate because they have nothing to bring to the table, but that's something certainly that could be looked at.
Making a library district?
Yes, a public library
There was a
district.
plan developed through the library board about a possibility for a library district, and Ann does have those details, so I think that she can provide that.
Is that a recent development?
It's years old. I'm
Okay.
not sure how old, but it's available, and I think she was going to review it with the mayor and then possibly you councilors as well, just as an opportunity.
I don't think that happened, but okay, thank you.
Any further reports? Councilor Ansel?
I just have two other issues that came up within my ward over the past week. The first had to do, I had a message on my answering machine at home on Saturday evening with a resident complaining about a neighbor using a fire pit very close to their fence. Sent me a follow-up email, and I think some other counselors may have also received it with pictures. They called the police, officer did respond. There was some negotiation back and forth, and the constituent felt a little put out because they felt like they were being asked to negotiate or give in, if you will, when the neighbor using the fire pit wasn't upholding the code that we had established and recently passed. I spoke with the police chief, Parkinson, and he has reassured me that his officers have been familiarized with the rules and regulations of the fire pit, and in this situation there's probably no way that the neighbor who was using a fire pit would be able to conform to the regulations that we set forth. So they've agreed not to use their fire pit anymore. But it brings about the bigger question that was raised when we passed the resolution, and that was uniform enforcement of the policy that we set forth. So I do have word of Chief Parkinson that the fire department or the police department is well aware of what the guidelines are, and any future complaints, those will be followed and they will be addressed. So I appreciate his work on that. The second issue I have, just prior to our meeting tonight, I received a complaint from an email from a constituent who has been in contact with our animal control officer, if you will. And for a couple of weeks now, they've had issues with woodchucks burrowing in their yard and actually coming close to their foundation. And the animal control officer told them that cages would not work to catch the woodchucks, and he didn't have any cages anyway, so it was kind of didn't make sense. In since then, I've heard of other complaints about woodchucks, skunks, raccoons, and I really think that it's an issue that we really need to tend to, because I think there are a lot of residents across the city that are having problems, and this is the second one that I've heard of within my ward within the past couple of weeks. I really
But if
think
the
it's an issue.
woodchucks are uncatchable, then I don't know what he can do about it.
Well, I'm not just talking woodchucks, I'm also talking skunks, I'm talking raccoons, I'm talking all sorts of vermin. But I think it's an issue that we need to address.
Thank you. Councilor Kelly?
I have personal experience with Mr. Burgess, and unfortunately, in contacting him, I had to make 3 phone calls before he would call me back. And then I got the same story about woodchucks, but it was also an opportunity for him to upsell his services. And I didn't appreciate that. I thought as a city resident, you know, this service is provided. Maybe it doesn't do everything that it possibly could do, but I also didn't like the fact that I then became a potential customer of his personal business rather than his contracted business with the city. And he did leave a trap for us for our woodchucks, and we caught a squirrel. We had to let the squirrel go. But yeah, I'm a little bit unhappy with that too, Peter. Something we need to look at and investigate, I suppose.
Well, I used Mr. Burgess as well. He came, he set up a trap, wasn't sure what was under there. 3 cats later, we never did catch. Because when you put out tuna fish, you're going to catch a cat. But never caught what was under there.
No.
But he was prompt. He told me to call him. I did a follow-up. I said, looks like it's not there. He came and took the trap. So, he got no sales pitch. So.
May I just ask a question of Joe? There's a development that's being reviewed by the planning board in my ward, adjacent to the museums, I believe, at that end of town.
It's down.
I had a constituent ask me a question regarding supposedly a development that will be next to the cemetery, if I understand his email correctly.
Across the street, on the Glens Falls Bank.
On the Glens Falls side.
Adjacent to the
Yeah, but there was some question of there being a request for a variance to increase the number of units.
Oh, yeah, that's in the pipeline right now.
Right, and so I just wanted to take this opportunity to have you tell us when the meeting, public input meeting would be.
The next zoning meeting, I believe, is the 3rd Monday, so I think it's the 17th.
17th of July,
Yep.
and that's on the docket.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's also on the planning guide. It's got a couple more meetings with the
Right. I just, here we are in a public meeting, trying to make that announcement, and I will try to communicate that to the neighbors who live in Lake Country Village, so.
Yeah, if they want to contact me about further information.
Good, I think the board would be interested.
Okay.
Any other reports or comments?
I just have one. I'd just like to reiterate, I mentioned it last week, but reiterate my dissatisfaction with the apparent misinformation that the council was given regarding reimbursement for the DRI budget officer position. I didn't know if you had received any word from the state with them saying that the position would be fully reimbursable.
I did discuss it with the state, and I did also go through past correspondences that reaffirmed our ability to do that. Thank you.
So you're saying that you were told that it's 100% reimbursable by the state, and you've been told by the state that it's 100%
We're doing things completely consistent with the research that Paul D. Dominicus, I think, had shared with you, actually.
So it'll have
that's right.
zero impact on our budget, and the city will not be on the hook for a single dollar of that
That's certainly
position.
what I expect, yeah.
Okay.
Any further questions? This is the opportunity for the public to come and please address the council on any subject of your concerns. Please, come forward.
I'm the fire pit person.
Mhm.
And I'm here just to show you the pictures in case you didn't get sent around, taken from the second floor of my house of where the fire pit was burning.
Thank you.
On Saturday night. And essentially, many of the homes on Grace Avenue have 60-foot wide yards. And then if you fenced in part of your backyard, or you have a shed, in the end, you have no place to put a fire pit, which makes me very happy. The fewer fire pits there are in my neighborhood, the more happy I am. But these people, I was not happy because this police officer, as you attempted to explain, actually came onto my porch and was trying to get me to agree to let them have a fire pit in the middle of their backyard. That backyard, as you can see, is about 45 feet wide. You can't have
Do you mind speaking at the microphone, just for the people at home?
Sorry, I'm used to.
That's what I know, but they want to hear you. Thank you so
The people at
much.
home want to hear me. You can't have a fire pit in that backyard, as has now been discussed. But I think the patrolman perhaps misunderstood the law, that there was supposed to be some negotiation, and I think that's only regarding the smoke. That if people are upset about the smoke, but it's otherwise compliant, otherwise it's 25 feet away from everything it needs to be away from, you might want to negotiate with the neighbors about when they do it or how they do it or whatever. But I'm thinking this 25-foot rule is not negotiable, correct?
That's correct.
So if the police come and they decide this house should not have a fire pit at all, does it go on the record somewhere? And I see you get building inspector reports about grass and hedges and complaints. Can we get fire pit complaints sent to you as well? Can there be a fire pit
If they go to the building inspector.
Well, then we don't call the building inspector. In general, he's closed at night. It's the police and the fire department. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can
We
have
need-
a
we need to
regular,
look in that. I think that's a very good idea.
a
considering-
regular report, so you have an idea of how this affects people.
Yeah, since we just passed that law and there's a lot of, on either side, I
Yes.
think it's a good idea to collect the data on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I think you also did receive the email from Chief Parkinson explaining
I
that.
didn't
Oh,
get it.
I'm sorry, I
No,
can forward
never
that
got
to
an
you.
answer. Sent my email on
Okay.
Monday, didn't hear anything back.
He responded to my email. I went and spoke with him, and then he sent me
You could
an
be in my
email.
junk mail.
Yeah, it's possible.
And he has told me that he has explained the rule to all of his officers and that
Okay,
it
thank
will
you.
be enforced.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other individuals like to come and address the council? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councilor Kelly, second by Councilor Dowdle. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passed.
I guess I'm catching up. What's
Mike.